On today's episode of The Front Row, we are downtown in the Lubbock Cultural District at the offices of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra, and our special guest on the program is Peter Bay, who is the music director and conductor of the Austin Symphony Orchestra, and we'd like to welcome him to Lubbock. Peter, thank you for being on the show today.
I'm very pleased to be here, Glenn. Thank you.
Well, first of all, for folks who don't know you very well, if you would, tell us a little bit about you and your journey in music, how you got interested, and what led you to your current position in Austin.
Well, I'll see if I can condense this. The trigger for me to be a conductor happened when I was about 8 or 9, and I had been watching a Leonard Bernstein Young People's concert. I'm sure this is a story that you've heard almost every conductor relate. But there was something about that broadcast, watching him conduct, the enthusiasm that he showed conducting the orchestra, the way he spoke to the young people in the audience, not talking underneath them or above them, just relating to them in a very interesting and intellectual way. I just thought what he was doing was very cool. And music was always played in my household, records, reel-to-reel tapes. So that kind of got it started. And so I've not wanted to do anything the last 59 years except want to be a conductor. Then I went the usual route through college, finally got some assistant conductor positions at Richmond, Rochester, New York, St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and then eventually I landed my own orchestra in Annapolis, Maryland, in Erie Philharmonic in Pennsylvania, and then for the last 28 years I've been in Austin.
28 years?
28 years. Yeah, they haven't kicked me out yet.
That's remarkable.
Well, there's something special about that orchestra, about that city, and I've really enjoyed my work there.
Great. If I could backtrack a little bit to the Leonard Bernstein thing, what I hear, and I think probably this is the case for you, is somehow he had this wonderful way of enthusiastically delving into the music and what the music, how it was composed, the theoretical things, but he never made it tedious. He made it fun. And you could get the music. You got it.
Yes. That came from his personality, from his intellect. Somehow being, it's like he could take apart a car engine and make it very enjoyable. He could take a very complex piece of music apart, tell you what all the components were, how they sound separately, and then when you put them all together, how more magnificent they sound. But he's just a born teacher. I think he had some rabbinical studies, and just was a scholar and a linguist, fond of learning, but especially fond of teaching.
Right. And a genius.
Exactly. And I was very lucky. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and when I was in high school, Bernstein came quite frequently to conduct the National Symphony. So through some very fortuitous circumstances, I went to probably 2 or 3 dozen rehearsals of Bernstein to see what he said to the orchestra. And all of that has just stayed with me. So if there's any part of him that comes out, it's strictly the enthusiasm for conducting fabulous music.
I knew you were going to say that.
hard to resist saying that.
Exactly. It's wonderful. Well, you're here in Lubbock to conduct the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra in a concert that takes place on Saturday evening in the Buddy Holly Hall. And it's a wonderful program. So it starts off with some Mendelssohn. Tell us about it.
Well, this is an overture that I feel is very severely underplayed. It's called The Story of the Fair Melusina. Melusina was a mermaid, and she marries a knight. But there's one big condition about their marriage, is that he could never look at her on Saturdays. She went to her own room, and that's when she became a mermaid, on Saturdays. Now, again, this is a very old fairy tale. And of course, he, as an idiot, couldn't help himself but took sight of her. He peeked into her room once and saw her as a mermaid. And what happens is, at that moment, she turned into a dragon and left him. So not only was their idyllic marriage over, but he's on his own, he's by himself, and she's gone.
Oh, no.
This story was originally brought to Beethoven as a possible opera, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out. But I'm fascinated to think what could have happened had Beethoven written this opera based on Melusina. But so the overture has a lot of watery kinds of sounds, beautiful solos for the clarinet, and then there's a much more aggressive part of the music, which I think refers to the knight and his eventual betrayal of her wishes.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it obviously Mendelssohn? Lots of notes.
Oh,
lots
yes.
Of felicity and all this kind of.
Oh yes, but gorgeous tunes, bubbly sounds. I would say also there's a little bit of Wagner in it from Das Rheingold. The watery music of Das Rheingold is in this overture. It's such a wonderful piece. I'm glad we're doing it here, and I think it makes a nice opening for the rest of the program.
Great. And the next thing on the program is a symphony by the Danish composer Carl Nielsen. For those of us who aren't that familiar with the scope of Nielsen's music, help us understand that symphony a little bit.
Well, first of all, Sibelius was probably the most important Scandinavian composer of symphonies. And so it came to Nielsen as a Dane to carry on that tradition. And it took him a while to get going. This symphony was written when he was 25. He was not a child prodigy like Mozart or anything like that. But he had this knack for writing very interesting symphonic music. And this first symphony is quite something in that it already breaks a lot of rules as far as where the harmonies are supposed to go, some interesting bluesy notes in it, while adhering to a classical form. It's in 4 movements, fast, slow, a scherzo, and then a finale. But within those 4 movements, there's all kinds of strange and interesting turns that the music makes. But it's still a very tonal, conservative symphony.
Right.
But it takes some risks, much like Sibelius did when he wrote his symphonies. They're very unpredictable in ways, and so Nielsen's symphonies are very much like that too. But in particular, this first one. Yeah.
Well, we're excited to hear it.
Yes, I'm indebted to David Cho for suggesting that I conduct it here. I am a huge Nielsen fan, but for whatever reason, I've never gotten around to this first symphony. I've done the third and the fourth quite a few times, and concertos and things, but never the symphony. So I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to introduce it to our Lubbock audiences.
We're grateful that you've done it, and we have a chance to explore it. That's going to be great. Then, to conclude the concert is one of the great pieces, the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto with soloist John Kimura Parker. That's going to be a thrilling thing to hear.
Oh yes, there's a reason why it's one of the most performed of all concertos, no matter what the instrument is. It's a virtuoso showpiece. It has wonderful melodies, lots of power, and Jackie Parker is the perfect person to play this piece. He has not only a great personality, he's a funny guy, but he's very powerful, very expressive, and has technique to burn.
Sure.
He's really an extraordinary pianist, and I'm glad to be working with him again. It's been a while.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, it's interesting that, of course, it's standard literature, but when it's sort of like the violin concerto of Tchaikovsky. When it was written, they all said he couldn't play it.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by these pieces that got horrible reviews when they were premiered, and now are the most performed of all pieces. Yes. Right. The man for whom Tchaikovsky wrote the piece said it was unplayable. It was it was an easy way to destroy the piano, overly written, too many notes, etc., etc., etc. He ended up eating his words, and I think conducted the concerto at one point. But it is. It also kind of, in a way, it parallels the Nielsen. The Nielsen, if I get into the weeds too much here, you can always cut this out. But
this is fascinating.
The first symphony is said to be in G minor, but it takes several minutes before he reaches that key. In the same vein, Tchaikovsky's concerto is called the B-flat minor concerto. But it doesn't start in B-flat minor. There's this tune that everybody knows, da 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 dum, dee da dum. Then once that tune has been stated, It never recurs. It never returns. And to me, that is one of the most bizarre moments in all of music.
Right.
Such a great tune. Why does it not return?
Do anything, right?
Yeah, it's over in the first 3 or 4 minutes, and then we get into the B flat minor business. But it is very, very odd, very, very odd. But yet, an example of a real masterwork and one that is caught on with audiences since shortly after the premiere.
Yeah, and standard literature.
Indeed.
Well, we can't wait to hear it with you conducting the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra with soloist John Kimura Parker. It looks to be a wonderful concert. We really, really appreciate it. And I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today and being our guest on the front row.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in Lubbock. I thank David Cho and Galen Wixon for bringing me here. I'm going to enjoy this program immensely.
Great.